Before I start, I wanted to mention how in the comments some people have been arguing with each other and accusing each other of deleting some comments, but when I looked into it, I can see all the comments, and you can see that the number is still large. Like when you click on it, it'll have a high number of people replying, but then you can only see a few, and I don't know why some comments are getting hidden. I can't see the problem with it, or if there's any bad words or anything like that, but it's just really strange, and I don't know how to fix it. So if you're wondering if what's happened there, I have no idea. Anyway, I briefly wanted to discuss this discussion in the comment where I showed this picture of Amber Heard holding her baby and lifting weights at the same time, and then somebody said, why is she holding the baby like that, and kind of making it seem like she was holding the baby wrong. And then I said, why are you mansplaining about it, da da da. And then that's something that kind of got people riled up. And then I was explaining that there's nothing wrong with the way she held the baby. And then someone sent me this diagram, this picture, and it basically showed this cartoon picture of the right ways to hold the baby and the wrong ways to hold it. And the way it was depicted in the picture looks nothing like the way Amber Heard was holding the baby, and that's what I said. And they kept arguing with me, saying that it was the same and blah blah blah. But if you look at the top, it's very important to see that this came from mumjunction.com, and I sent them a bunch of different links of people holding the baby in a similar way to the way Amber was holding the baby. And I also told them to Google how to hold a baby with one arm, look up belly hold, and you can see a bunch of people holding the baby in the exact same way. And if you remember that same website, Mum Junction, the same site that they sent me a picture from, they had this whole article talking about good ways to hold a baby, and it said number 3, the belly hold, and it says, your baby will surely enjoy this baby hold. Here is how to handle the newborn. And it's being held in exactly the same way Amber Heard was holding her baby. And it was just such a ridiculous thing that we went back and forth on for a long time. I just wanted to show people the fact that he sent me this website, Mum Junction, and you can see on the very same website you could have a clearer representation of what Amber Heard was doing, and he refused to look at that one and deny that source, and then trying to say that I was being immature by saying that what he did was mansplaining. But I honestly don't know how else to describe this entire interaction. And then when all that ended up fizzling out, and then I kind of proved that it was a legitimate way to hold a baby, their point became, well, maybe she shouldn't be lifting weights and carrying a baby at the same time.
Maybe I should.
Uh-huh.
Pretty much. Anyway, you. Maybe you should climb out of my butt.
What? What?
Hmm?
What?
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 I don't. What?
There was just nothing wrong with what she did at all. You can hold a baby and do another thing at the same time. It's okay for a mother to multitask. Sometimes mothers hold a baby like that while cooking or tidying up a little bit. But what difference is lifting weights? She probably wasn't lifting it for real. It was just for a picture, I think. But I don't know why they made such a big deal out of it and tried to say, oh, there's something wrong with it, and refused to admit that they were wrong. It was just ridiculous.
So please, just please, watch your mouth, ass bag.
So on Twitter, someone asked a hypothetical question saying, you have to commit a crime for it to be never committed again. What crime are you doing? And then somebody responded, rape, to be honest. I'd rape some horrible woman like Amber Heard or some shit, and then no decent woman would have to struggle ever again. They then go on to say, because someone responded, you defo have a Amber Heard fetish, and then he says, nah, she was the only fit, despicable woman that came to mind. Gal Gadot or Kim Kardashian are other good shouts. In response to that, some Amber Heard supporters said that what he said was misogynistic, and they had a lot of issues with his answer there. And there were other people replying to what he said, saying that it wasn't misogynistic and they didn't understand what was wrong with what he just said. So I just wanted to explain all the issues that I found and some other answers to that question that I don't think that any of them ever considered, and talk about it a bit more because I think it's an interesting discussion. Okay, so the first reply I'm going to talk about is this person who said, I don't get how you can get cooked for that. To be honest, it's a genuine great point and would protect so many women. So the first issue with that is that rape can happen to both men, women, and children. So I don't know why he's singling out that it would protect only women. And then it goes back to what that first person initially said when they said, I'd rape some horrible woman and then no decent woman would have to struggle ever again. Again, like, they're not taking note of the fact that both men and women can get raped. And then he's singling out these three women, Gal Gadot, Kim Kardashian, and Amber Heard, as the women that he would choose to rape. And I think that the reason why is that they have to be a horrible and also physically attractive woman, because it's very important for him to get some pleasure out of doing this incredibly heroic act for man and womankind. And I think with the Kim Kardashian and Gal Gadot thing, because I'm not even sure what either of them did to be classed as like horrible women. Like, what's the bar of what makes someone horrible? And why did he have to choose to rape a woman? Why did he not choose to do it to a horrible man is the other thing. And I think that genuinely did not occur to them as an option for a lot of the people that replied, that they could rape another terrible man and that would stop all rape for everyone. And it just suggests to me that they still want to get some sort of pleasure out of doing this terrible act, and it diminishes how seriously they take rape, and that they don't consider themselves to be possible victims of it if they talk about it in this way. I mean, he could have chosen to rape a murderer or a prolific child molester like Larry Nassar or something like that. But instead he chose like someone who he dislikes for petty reasoning, kind of. Like with Kim Kardashian, I'm assuming that would be petty reasoning. If it is like too much of a sacrifice to be gay for like a minute and rape another man in order to save all of mankind from that terrible, terrible crime, he could have chosen to rape a dead person, like someone who was like freshly dead. He could have raped them, and then necrophilia. I mean, it still counts as the crime of rape, so he could have done that. And it's also a mixture of other crimes, so it's like tackling a lot of birds with like one stone. So that seems like a good option, and then you don't actually hurt anyone for real. Like that could also be an option. Again, I don't think that this ever occurred to them, because that would be so gross to do. Because I think when you're doing a heroic act, it's very important to prioritize your own personal pleasure, because if you don't get anything out of it, if you don't get any enjoyment out of it, what's the point of doing it at all? Like, there'd be zero point in doing anything like that. Altruism isn't really real. So if you don't feel any pleasure, I don't see why anyone would do something like that. Anyway, going back to the responses, one of his friends replied saying, that isn't even that bad to say. You're saving loads of girls with that opinion, lol. Okay, so they're just trying to be sweet. They're just trying to be heroes. That's so, and we're just too stupid to see it. That's the issue.
I'm sorry. My mother won't let me eat this much bologna.
I think that this answer to the question already feels very sexist to me. And the reason why is because in real life, nearly 99% of perpetrators are male. And then for this hypothetical situation, to say that a man would be the one to do this heroic act to save all the women and girls from rape ever happening again, it kind of bothers me. And I have a different way of going about it. I'm having some difficulty phrasing this because I really don't want to sound conceited or anything, but because I don't think my answer is the best answer ever. But if I were to give it any merit, I would say that it's an answer that doesn't exclude men. Like, I think the justification that I have, it would also work if a man were to say the same thing. So if I were to go about the same thing, if I chose rape as the crime to commit, and that would mean that that crime could never happen again, the way I would do it would be very different. Again, like as a woman, I think that would be very different. If you look over the definition of it, the legal definition of rape in the UK is when a person intentionally penetrates another's vagina, anus, or mouth with a penis without the other person's consent. And then the US definition is kind of varied, but I found that it says penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of the victim. Right. Seems simple enough. So after giving it some thought and tinkering around with a couple of different ideas, I think my solution, if I was going to do rape, is what I would do is find a dead person and then just like a dead man, and then chop off their own penis and then put it in their mouth, and technically that would fit the definition of what rape is. And then I feel like that would be a good solution, because if it's the dead person, then they wouldn't be affected by it as much and they wouldn't feel pain from it. And then because it's their own penis, it's like less of a violation. Like, you don't have to think of it as rape in a traditional, the normal sense of it, but it still kind of meets the criteria. And also, how much easier is it to just do what I did? Like, anyone can do what I did. Both men and women could do the same thing I did in that scenario, and it would still protect men and women. But no, they decided to go by this other example of raping a woman that they deemed to be horrible for some, based on these petty, stupid reasoning, and then justify that that's someone who is deserving of rape. Like, no one believes that these people care about if rape is that bad of a thing. Like, no one believes that that's true for them. And personally, I don't believe that people ever do stuff out of the goodness of their hearts. And so whenever they were saying that this is a good point and it would protect so many women, I question, why would a man want to protect women? Why would they want to do that? What's the end goal there? It always seems fishy to me. And I don't think the reason why he chose rape was because he cared about the well-being of women and girls or anything like that. I think he, for some bizarre reason, wanted to broadcast his rape fantasy of Amber Heard to the world for some, I don't know why, but that's why I think the main reason why he chose it was. And I don't like the attitude of, like, because 99% of perpetrators of sexual assault are men, that you assume that women can't fix this thing for themselves. Like, why would you choose this cause? It makes no sense why he would pick this cause. And I don't believe for a second that he cares about rape so much if he needs to pick all these attractive women to do it. Like, he wants to get enjoyment out of this hypothetical situation. Is very easy. Everyone can see through it. I mean, if they don't believe that rape is that bad of a thing, I'd rather they just say it with their whole chest and not have all these ridiculous shenanigans and ways of going around it to be like, no, I was actually trying to be a hero. Just stop it. Just stop it. And I hope that we've all learnt a little lesson about how women can do whatever they set their minds to with just a little bit of creative thinking. We can do whatever we want to do. So, why is it that 99% of perpetrators of sexual violence are male? Because why is it not something that women also want to do? Because the first example of rape that I saw on TV was actually done by a woman to a man on Desperate Housewives. That's the clearest memory I have of that happening on TV. And what she did was, well, it doesn't actually make any sense, but his ex-wife wanted to get pregnant by him, so she gave him drugs, like a sleeping thing and Viagra, and then she raped him. But then, if she wanted to get pregnant, I don't think that makes sense to do. It was a stupid storyline, but it was just something different that doesn't normally occur in real life. And I guess they're trying to say that the purpose of it was so that she could have a child, not because she would get pleasure out of the act. And with the people saying like, why is it such a bad thing that someone would say this, and it's not even that bad, da, da, da. It is that bad because you just exposed that you would get pleasure out of raping someone you deem to be horrible, but who has to be very attractive at the same time. So now we know that you get pleasure out of that kind of act. You would get pleasure out of that kind of act. So it does say a lot about your character by approving of that message. And in a moral conundrum where you're supposed to think about reducing harm as much as possible and things like that, it's so clear that no thought was put into it at all, no effort to reduce the suffering. In fact, it suggested that they would take great pleasure from causing her pain in this kind of thing. And then to justify it by saying that she is a horrible woman, like to say that you can find an excuse to rape someone if they are a bad enough woman, if you arbitrarily decide that they're not likable enough, then that can give you an excuse to rape someone. Yeah, that makes you look bad. Ultimately, it's clear that no woman could ever meet this silly, unattainable standard for likability for most men. So if it's that easy to justify doing it to Amber Heard, you could probably easily justify doing it to any other woman. So the next comment I wanted to highlight is this person who said, why is that so bad? Is it better if I say that I want to kill somebody so nobody gets killed ever again? So I think this is a great comment to show you how stupid some of these people are, and how small-minded they are by saying it's either killing or rape. And they're not looking at all the other options of things you could do besides that. Like, I don't even know why you would choose rape at all. I would not choose rape. If it were me, I definitely would not have chosen rape. Because rape and sexual assault are described as different things. So even if you did this thing when no one is ever allowed to rape again, they would still be able to do all kinds of different sexual assault. And I think based on the way they discuss it, it shows you that they believe that people do rape other people for sexual gratification when that's not necessarily true. But anyway, if we look over this question again, there's just so many options in my head of other things that you could do that would be better. They could have they could drink and then drive a little bit, like not cause any damage, and then that would mean that nobody could drink and drive ever again. They could smoke crack one time, and that would mean that nobody could have illegal drugs ever again, and that would help a lot of addicts and stuff like that perhaps. They could kidnap someone for a short period of time and then release them, and then that way no one could ever be kidnapped again, and that could also like branch out to sex trafficking, slavery, things like that. So that would be a good one to choose. You don't have to rape anyone. They could obtain a firearm illegally, although I'm not sure if that would help that much. It might like reduce something. I don't know. But you know what would be really interesting is if like cyberbullying would be an interesting one to pick, because it would be cool to see what the internet would look like if you eliminated that. You just cyberbully one person and then no one is allowed to do it ever again. And I think it could also branch out to like revenge porn, stuff like that. So that would be a cool one to choose, I think. I just think it's so unnecessary to go down the rape route when kidnapping is right there. Like, I wouldn't choose that. It's just so silly. Why? Quite simply, they just did not need to go there. They really didn't. And if you think about it like this, like, say if you wanted to stop child molestation, would anyone ever be bold enough to say publicly on the internet that they would molest one child, and that would mean that no child ever has to be molested ever again? Would they ever say that and then try to justify it by saying that the child was horrible enough? Like, I don't think that makes any sense whatsoever. And I think it really makes you wonder, like, who made them bold enough to think that they can say these things publicly and feel no shame whatsoever? Like, who did that? It's a huge mystery to me. Moving on, speaking of child molestation, I just wanted to discuss the Kevin Spacey thing briefly, and his publicist, what his publicist allegedly told him to do, because in the trial that he had, he said that he was encouraged to apologize, and that he has now learned this important lesson, which is to never apologize for something that you didn't do. And he said that he regretted his entire statement. And I found this very interesting because it still leaves a lot of questions unanswered here. And I think it kind of related to the Johnny Depp stuff slightly, because I was always wondering, like, why is Johnny Depp continuously apologizing to Amber Heard over and over again and wanting to take her back if she's making these outlandish allegations against him? And if he thinks that he didn't do it, why did he say sorry? And I've said before, you should never, ever, ever apologize for something that you didn't do. And that was the biggest mistake. And I was curious, like, why are these people allowed to, like, get away with these things and for it not to be a big problem? And in his statement, he cried, he choked up and said, "It's my responsibility. I put it out there. It was really wrong. It was really sad. And I'm deeply sorry. I have to own that." And the thing that gets me is that he's accusing his publicist of being the one to tell him that this was the right move to do. And I don't want anyone to forget that this is now what Kevin Spacey is alleging. He's now displaced a lot of the blame to his publicist. And it's absurd to me that he's saying that his publicist said it was a good idea for him to own up to this stuff on, I think it was a tweet, where he said that, well, apparently he's saying that the reason why the publicist said it was a good idea was to avoid victim blaming. And then in the apology, he said, it was kind of like, oh gosh, did I? I'm sorry if I did do that. And if I did do it, it was because I was extremely drunk. And I think that's bizarre for a publicist to think that that is ever a good idea, to say that the reason why you did something was because you were drunk. And also, this is an allegation about a 14-year-old. And first of all, I think it is ludicrous to believe that a publicist who is experienced and knows how to deal with this stuff would ever say that it's a good idea to say that he did anything with a 14-year-old. I don't think that makes any sense. And I think now that there's so many more allegations made against him, it's starting to read like the reason why he apologize to him was to kind of do damage control by saying that this was a one-time occurrence. It was like he was drunk one time, and this was the only time it ever happened. And it could have been because he knows he's done other stuff and he's trying to get ahead of it. But it's so strange to believe that a publicist would say, yes, just go along with it, and things will be okay. And I think it makes sense, like with other cases like Louis C.K. He did take ownership of it, and he moved on from it, and some other people have been able to move on after taking ownership. But I think that when it comes to a 14-year-old type thing, I don't know why he would think that it would be that easy to gloss over for a lot of people. I don't understand why a publicist would think this could make sense. And then this idea of victim blaming, because that is super revealing, because that suggests that something did happen. And what I'm thinking is that perhaps Kevin Spacey does sort of remember something about this. And the reason why he said victim blaming is because he doesn't want to, he wants to make it seem like it wasn't entirely unwanted advances. And I think if you were talking about someone over the age of 18, his explanation for what happened would be completely different. He might say that Anthony was the one who seduced him, and then da da da, and or maybe he would say that he just misread the signals and he wasn't being creepy about it, and all these things, and people could have brushed over it quite easily. But I think when it is someone underage, it's a bit different, and I don't know why. Why on earth would a publicist say that this is a good idea? I just don't believe it at all. Is it just me? Like, how can this make any sense? There was that terrible video that he did, which makes me really think that no way did a publicist approve to any of his actions. I don't believe that for a second. And then when I looked into it, apparently both his agent and publicist dropped him early on. And I think that what might be going on is that he's decided to displace a lot of the blame onto his publicist, and it's so nonsensical. I can't believe that anyone could believe that a publicist would tell him, yes, this stuff is okay. It's okay to make a video like this. It's okay to tweet something saying, yes, oh gosh, did I? And if I did, it was because I was drunk. No way do I believe a publicist would say that that is the right move in that type of situation. I think he went rogue and decided to do this stuff. And now after, he can now blame other people, and people are gonna buy it. And it's just ridiculous that people believe that a publicist said to him, like, you should own up to this, even if you don't remember, own up, say that it's a possibility, but also so that you can avoid victim blaming. Like, this publicist has the sense to say to avoid victim blaming, but it's gonna okay the fact that Kevin Spacey said that if it did happen, it was because he was drunk. Like, how? That's the big giveaway. It's like, why would him being drunk excuse anything? Why does he think that that makes any sense? I think it's a big tell that this is not coming from someone who knows what they're doing. He probably just acted instinctively, said this stuff, and then the reason why his publicist ended up dropping him was because he was making her look like a fool by going out there doing this video, this tweet, and everyone's criticizing what he did, and it's like, this is the worst way that the celebrity has ever handled a situation like this. I think was what he did, because it was so bad. It was so bad, especially the videos. Like, why? How can anyone believe a publicist told him that any of that stuff was a good idea? It makes no sense. And I'm only going to dissect this whole publicist thing, like the things that he's alleging his publicist told him to do, because I feel like it's such a blatant lie, and it reveals a lot about what he believes is right and wrong, because believing that the drunken thing would take away the problem, saying that he apologized, he thought that by apologizing on Twitter would be enough, to remove this whole thing, and he wouldn't have to deal with any actual consequences. If you look at the power and control wheel, it seemed that his response was just trying to minimize the situation, deny it, and blaming it. He was sort of making light of the abuse in the video, not taking it too seriously, and thinking that he could brush it over quite easily. And I think that the reason why the jury ruled the way it did, I don't think I hope that it wasn't because they bought into some of these lies. I think that in general, when it comes to assault cases like this, I don't have high expectations for people to punish the perpetrators that severely, especially when it's just inappropriate touching. People are reluctant to give real consequences to something like that, and it's an unfortunate thing. And because of the age difference, like when he was 14 and Kevin Spacey's 26, I can believe that perhaps the jury just isn't that sympathetic to if this did happen, and they might think that this was just an unwanted advance and it's not something to ruin a man's life over. And I think that could be what is actually going on. I don't believe that the reason why they ruled the way they did is because they believe that Anthony Rapp is jealous over Kevin Spacey's career. And I'm also wondering what will happen next. Will Kevin Spacey end up suing Anthony Rapp for defamation of character, and then what would that mean? Are they gonna say the reason why he told the story is because he's that jealous and vindictive, and why did he pick on Kevin Spacey in particular? And is he gonna be called? Are they gonna say that he's crazy and has histrionic personality disorder and all that kind of stuff? I'm not sure. I honestly don't believe that the jury thought of it like that. I think they just are reluctant to punish people severely when it comes to inappropriate touching, and they minimize what it was, and they don't take it that seriously. Again, with the age difference, like, because 14, they may say that that's not really a child, and because Kevin Spacey's 26, they may say that he was quite young, and that's part of the reason why those things, they don't get taken too seriously, especially at the time when it happened. And now I want to bring your attention to this thing that I learnt about in the Johnny Depp case. It's called the North American Man-Boy Love Association, and I learnt about it because one of his friends, Allen Ginsberg, was a member of this thing, and it's this kind of a big pedophilia organization. And basically, when I looked into it, their point was that a lot of gay men kind of get more prison time and stuff like that when they're in relationships with people who are underage, and then they're making the point of how heterosexual people get away with it all the time and people don't seem to care as much. And if you look at it, that is a point. It's not a great point, but you see all the time where people make excuses when it comes to a younger girl with an older man, where for the Roman Polanski thing, a lot of people were defending him. Like, there was this quote from Quentin Tarantino where he was defending Roman Polanski, saying that he didn't rape a 13-year-old. It was statutory rape. He said that he had sex with a minor. That's not rape. To me, when you use the word rape, it's one of the most violent crimes in the world. And then he goes on to say that she wanted to have it. She dated the guy, and he says, "I don't believe it's rape. I believe it's against the law. It's not rape for these 13-year-old party girls," which I think tells you a lot about what was normalized at that time. And I think with the way Anthony Rapp explained the situation, and why Kevin Spacey said, if I did do it, it was because I was drunk, was a way to minimize that thing and brush it off and say, well, I just misread the situation. It was an honest mistake, da da da. And I think that's why he said it like that. Because I really am trying to understand why Kevin Spacey ever said what he said in the initial apology, and after hearing what some of these other guys have said, like Quentin Tarantino here, about it doesn't count. He was dating this 13-year-old girl, so it shouldn't really count. As if that makes any sense. And that's why I think if this is true, that Kevin Spacey doesn't connect that he's done anything wrong, and that's why he's made the excuse of, well, it was because I was drunk and da da da. And maybe he probably does know that it's wrong. His publicist probably did explain to him that it was kind of wrong, but he doesn't really see it like that, because they don't see statutory rape as actual rape. And also because it wasn't rape at all, because it didn't progress to sex, like, because we kind of normalize things like groping and inappropriate touching, especially to women. It's pretty common for that to happen. So I can see that in his perhaps allegedly twisted mind, that this stuff doesn't count. To him, he still sees himself as okay, and that could be what's happening. And I think as a culture, we haven't changed that much. You still see people saying similar things to this day. There's this quote from Christy Elliott where he said, "You ever see a fucking 14-year-old?" And he says, "She looks 30. I've never seen, there's no such thing as a 14-year-old girl anymore. They go from like 6 to 25. And it just makes you wonder, like, how come none of these people seem to have decent publicists who can, because that's supposed to be their job, is to get them to say anything but things like this publicly, and yet they keep saying things like this publicly with no sense that they probably shouldn't. And it's still so common for teenage girls to have relationships with 20-year-old guys, or maybe even older than that, and like people don't question it as much, and their parents approve of it perhaps. And then you can kind of see the NAMBLA perspective a bit more, where they're advocating for people to be released from prison and stuff like that, because they're saying heterosexual people get away with it all the time, out and about. Like, even like Johnny Depp with Winona Ryder when he was 26 and she was 17, and people didn't think that there was anything wrong with that, even though it was technically breaking the law. And even like beyond that, we see it all the time and people don't question it with groupies, things like that. Like, no one seems to think that there's an issue with it. And beyond that, making excuses for it, like saying that girls mature faster than boys, and a 14-year-old girl doesn't look like a 14-year-old girl. And that's not true. 14-year-old girls do look 14, or they look like teenagers. And I think the difference is a 14-year-old boy looks much younger. Like, I saw this movie when I was 13, and it had Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood, and they were supposed to be 12, 13 in it, and they looked like children. I'll show you, look at it. Look at how tiny, look how small they are. Can you believe that that's supposed to be 12, 13? And I think that's what they're trying to get at, like, when it's still wrong for a 14-year-old girl, but for a 14-year-old boy, because so many of them look so clearly young, that it's just absurd that someone would make a whole association trying to argue the point that an adult having a relationship with someone that young makes any sense. I mean, it's such a bold move that it kind of, what I'm thinking might have happened is because this was such a long time ago, and because maybe a lot of people weren't out as gay back then, the motives behind it was coming kind of from desperation, and that maybe they were trying to groom some younger boys into relationships. And it made me think of the Joe Exotic, and how he married two guys and both of them didn't identify as homosexual, but they still ended up marrying him and having this relationship. And I wonder if like it's because of this sort of power imbalance, because they were quite a bit younger than him. So I wonder if that's part of why they decided to take the risk of forming this whole association, was because of this, and then trying to say it's because of how heterosexual people get away with it all the time, that they should be able to get away with it, and maybe the solution is to like not let heterosexual people get away with it as often as they do. Maybe that's the right solution. And the reason why I'm bringing it up and relating it to Kevin Spacey is because I think that the fact that he was closeted this entire time could like explain why he was making some of these alleged predatory moves towards people, because these other allegations from people in the workplace where he's not even where he's apparently made advances and doesn't seem to care whether or not the people he's doing it to are the same sexual orientation as him. You know, it kind of reminds me of the Joe Exotic thing again, because he married these two people who didn't identify as homosexual, and it didn't really matter. And I wonder if that could be why he behaved that way. And obviously this case with Kevin Spacey is not done yet, and I'm curious to see what is going to happen with these other people, because with Anthony Rapp, he accused him of making these allegations because he was vindictive and jealous of his career, and so he lied, and he lied because he thought it would help advance his own career. And now there's people on House of Cards who made allegations against him, and by doing that it was kind of detrimental to their own career, and they said that the reason why they didn't speak up was to protect their livelihood. They didn't want to get fired, they didn't want to get blacklisted, things like that. So I'd be curious to see what the excuse will be moving forward, and I wonder if he will end up suing Anthony Rapp for defamation of character. We'll see. And let me know if you ever did believe that Kevin Spacey's publicist did advise him to apologize in the way he did, and this addition of saying that if he did do it is because he was drunk. What do you think about that? Am I the only one who thinks that is the most blatant fucking lie they've ever heard? Is it really just me? Please let me know.